Hi, everybody. My name is Phil Gervasi, and I'm a technical evangelist at Riverbed. We have about 30 minutes, you and I, together today. And what I want to do, I think, is pretty straightforward. I'd like to explain, starting with where John was just a moment ago, I want to talk about what we're doing at Riverbed, why we're doing it, and then the cool stuff, how we're going to do it, or how we're doing it. Our heritage is in WAN optimization, like John said, ultimately making applications perform better over the network. And you probably already knew that. That's what we're known for. That's our heritage. And it's still very much a big part of who we are. So I want you to keep that in mind. Our goal with WAN optimization and now with visibility has always been to make applications work better over the network, or at least the way they should, right? So performance is a big part of that. WAN optimization, application acceleration. But what's also a huge part of ensuring optimal, secure, and consistent service delivery is also visibility. So visibility into network devices, into switches and routers and firewalls. Visibility into individual transactions between clients and servers, it's very powerful. Visibility into public cloud environments, and visibility basically into everything involved with delivering an application down to an end user. So ultimately, that's what Riverbed does. Just to put it in one kind of succinct statement, we ensure through our performance and visibility solutions that the applications your business relies on work consistently, securely, and at peak performance. So in other words, we make network operations work better. Now, later on, Vince will be talking about Riverbed's future vision, and Gwen will be demoing specifically some of the things that we're doing on the performance side of the house. So as I said, Riverbed is probably best known for its long history of WAN optimization, and really just making applications work better over the network. And to do that, we operate at the packet level. So we've always had that kind of a closeness to the network, right down at the packet level to what's going on real time, literally packet by packet. That's our heritage. And that is actually what's going to form the basis of our visibility solutions today. Now, what we do as far as visibility is concerned, it's not limited to just handing you as sysadmins, netadmins, whatever your roles are in your organizations. It's not just handing you a bunch of shiny graphs with data points on them. We're good at that. We're good at collecting and presenting information, but that's sort of table stakes for any visibility company today. Individual data points are just a starting point. So think about them as individual brush strokes in a painting. They do have meaning in and of themselves to an extent, but it's all how they come together that paints a picture. So out of all the shows on Disney Plus and on Amazon Prime right now, my kids could be binging on. I have 3 little ones. For some reason, and I'm not joking, they're binging Painting with Bob Ross. That's what they're watching in the morning while they're eating their cereal. And I'm not joking. And so here he is for you on the screen, painting a beautiful picture, something that has meaning overall, brushstroke by brushstroke. So what I want you to come away with today, what I want to be crystal clear, is that Riverbed's visibility solutions are all about providing meaningful insight into the data that we collected from all your routers and your switches and servers and cloud environments and all of that. Those are the individual brushstrokes. So what that means to us is putting all that data into a business context, and that's usually in terms of a specific service or an application. That's what we really care about. That's what visibility is all about to us. And so to us, that's the big picture. What do all these individual data points mean? All the brushstrokes. What do they tell us about an application, how it's performing? So let me ask you, what does it matter if a switch is running at 90% utilization or a CPU utilization? Who cares? Who cares if a backend database server in AWS is taking over half a second to reply to a connection request? Who cares? Is that normal behavior? Maybe it is. Is it affecting anything? See, these are all individual data points, and they're important. We care about their accuracy and their timeliness, but even more so, we care about how these data points relate to each other in the context of a specific application. That's the whole point. So this is what Riverbed does. We provide the entire spectrum of visibility, end to end, from the very granular all the way to an overall application performance view and everything in between, in real time and historically. So we paint the big picture. Our goal, yes, question.
I have a question. Yeah, sorry. I mean, it looked, on paper, this is great. Actually, when you start dealing with with a complex enterprise environment with several vendors doing several different things in the network, I mean SD-WAN, switches, routers, whatever, and then the cloud, for which you don't have control on anything. I mean, they just provide you an access gateway, but you don't even have control on that one. So I mean, I totally getting the full picture, but it's not a full picture. I mean, or do you support everything, even things that are, not in the open, like AWS networking or Amazon or Azure networking or whatever? So how do you do that?
Yeah, we have some capability to capture those cloud flows, whether it's AWS or Azure, and we're working on developing that stuff down the road of making more of that cloud native and containers and things like container management resources, all that stuff, ephemeral information in the cloud. So we're always looking to improve. You're right. That's a great question. And that's something that we're looking at as being forward thinking. But the way we look at it is flows, packets flown over the network, vCenter logs, all that kind of information. We're able to pull as much as we can. And so then we can start to build a picture. If we're focused only on AWS flow logs, right, or something like that, we're going to be missing information. So that's why we do try to pull as many resources as we can. Now, that we're still developing so we can pull additional resources, and specifically cloud and containers is our future focus. Well, it's our focus right now, but as far as developing, if that makes sense. And so when we paint a big picture of what's going on with an application, we are looking at packets, we are looking at just regular SNMP traps, we're looking at flows, we're looking at logs from AWS, and then we can start to piece that together and say, what is a connection request, what is a round trip time, and what do all those things mean? So to answer your question, we're looking at a variety of things to do that. And so if there is a little missing cog, if there is a missing piece, we're still able to provide a very meaningful insight into what's going on with your, SharePoint application or whatever you're running. So that's what we do. I hope that at least, and you're going to hear a little bit more later on as we go through it, some of the things that we're working on.
And Phil, I'd like to piggyback on that, if I may. This is Tony. Bringing visibility into the cloud is a very interesting problem to solve. And I'm kind of wondering, what is Riverbed's take on this? And I don't mean to sort of derail if you guys are going to talk about this, but is your sort of preferred strategy to deploy like a Riverbed cloud native virtual appliance in that cloud environment? Or is it to pull all of the cloud native data points from the cloud provider itself, from AWS, from Azure, from Google Cloud, as far as some of them are introducing packet capture capabilities now that allow you to tap traffic over to maybe an appliance or something else. You mentioned flow logs, stuff like that. What's the best way to get that visibility? Is it deploying the virtual appliance, or is it pulling those data points, or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of both, for sure. Combination of both, and probably some additional metrics that we're able to get as well. So flow logs, going into one of our tools, NetProfiler, we're going to talk about that. We have AppResponse Cloud, which is a VM that we're going to stand up in whatever cloud environment, and whether that's front end or behind whatever load balancers and firewalls, it's really based on the customer how we do that. But yeah, we want to get access to the packets, whether they're on-prem in a colo or in AWS, and we can do that. Now, it's kind of straightforward to us. We just want to get the packets. We want to get those flow logs. We want to get those vCenter logs. We want to see as much as we can. So some of that is a little bit more difficult when we're looking at Office 365 or whatever SaaS provider. So we're still working on that. Some of that is difficult because it's ephemeral information, Docker containers in AWS, like I mentioned earlier. That's a little bit more difficult. Those are things that we're working on. But we will just deploy a VM and then use that to collect packets, to collect flows, to collect whatever we need, because there's different tools dedicated for each of those purposes. And then it all feeds into a parent tool, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And so when you look at the client sitting at a remote office, and when you look at several different cloud instances, maybe something you have in AWS and Azure, and you can look at what it's the connection request time or the setup time or whatever between your front end database, or rather your front end servers in AWS and your back end database in Azure, you can see that and measure it. And then you can see how long it's taking for that page to load down at the client sitting at their house or in their coffee shop or in an office. You could start to build that picture because we have all those components.
My question, I'm not a networking guy, so that sometimes I miss some pieces here and there, but actually a similar, talk, I can get it from Cisco and others. I mean, huge name in the networking, they have the components, the equipment, so they have, some starting base there. So what is the real differentiator of Riverbed here? I mean, when you talk about, visibility on the network, observability of the network in general.
Yeah. Now, I do look at visibility and observability a little bit different. And we're headed toward that observability panacea, I hope, one day. And I define them differently simply, on one hand, because I'm seeing that the market is starting to use that word, but internally, we use the terms differently. Observability is sort of taking all that information and doing more than what I'm going to talk about today, which is deriving meaning and correlation, but then using, those future-looking tools and functionality like AI and ML to group and to structure what's otherwise unstructured data to, do something meaningful with it. And we look at that more as observability. Now, as far as what we're doing that differentiates us, one of our things that we're proud of is our time to packets, how fast we can get to packets, collect packets, and then present them to a network operations engineer or a sysadmin. Yes, by the way, we are very network centric. I get that. And so without having to do packet captures, without having to do any kind of ad hoc stuff, all that synthetic monitoring, all of that stuff is happening continuously and is available to a sysadmin literally in a few seconds with a couple clicks. So that's one main thing. We're very focused on the network operations piece, and we're focused on collecting as much data as possible and then organizing it. So I don't know exactly what Cisco is doing right now or a particular company, because I know that there's some flux with acquisitions and stuff. But I know that that's what we're very proud of as far as differentiating us from the market and really pushing an end-to-end story. So if I can continue, I'll actually go into the specifics of, this is a little bit more high level. I didn't want to be overly networking in this presentation. So, if you want to stop me about a technical question, that's great. I will talk about some of our tools in a moment. So really what I want to do is I want to talk about why we're doing this. So this might help you, gentlemen that ask questions. What are we trying to solve? What are the problems that we're trying to solve? We're well aware that we're dealing with a highly distributed environment now, right? That's what John mentioned, with our end users working from home, branch offices, whatever. We have applications running out of private on-prem data centers, cloud, multiple clouds, colo, SaaS providers. We heard questions, in that context just now. So I think you do get the idea. So we want to, focus on delivering a business critical application down to an end user wherever they are, which that application is relying on a distributed environment where resources are everywhere and anywhere. That's a problem. How do we get visibility to that? And I think we're on the same page, because your questions kind of reflected that. And like you said, they could be resources that you own, resources that you don't own. So how do you know what's going on? So that's one of the big problems: visibility into a highly distributed environment with resources all over that you might own or not own. And that introduces more opportunity for performance issues. And it opens the door for more attack vectors too. So in the context of security. So visibility into what's going on is more difficult. That's our first main problem. And the other main problem is just making sense of all the noise. We've been talking about all these data points, right? Making sense of the incredible amount of information we get from the network and network related devices, from servers, whatever else. That's the whole point of visibility, is collecting that and then making sense of it. We really don't care about memory utilization all that much. Maybe you do. I don't really care that much about how long it takes a particular packet to get from one end of the network to the other. What we do care about is how the application is performing. What do those data points have to do with that? Are they irrelevant? So there's so much information, so much noise. How do we isolate what's important? How do we perform a root cause analysis, which, remember, is inherently kind of an open-ended problem? So that's the second problem: organizing lots of data points and making it useful to network operations. Because remember that key here, we want to make network operations work better. Now, some of you know me already kind of well. I've been a network engineer for years, and I know exactly, and maybe you do as well, what it's like to troubleshoot some sort of a problem. Usually an application problem, and it's not working right, or it's slow, maybe not at all. And I basically have to log into device by device by device looking for clues. So I've chased interesting data points before, only to find out that they were irrelevant. And I've used visibility tools that have really nice graphs. And they show me those individual data points from a router interface, a server, vCenter logs, whatever. And those are helpful, but what we're trying to say is what we do at Riverbed is we sort of see that as table stakes, as I said earlier. This is the baseline for troubleshooting and performance monitoring, collecting all that information. Really, the heart of what I'm talking about today is what do we do with all that now? We want to organize it so it's meaningful to you. Now, I want to pause here. This is the second time that I use the term table stakes in this presentation. So this would be a perfect time for some of you to place a live tweet with a picture of a table made out of stakes with some sort of clever quip about Riverbed visibility, hashtag TFD23. So we're all about solving those two problems, the difficulty of service monitoring in a distributed environment. By the way, service monitoring and application monitoring, we use those terms kind of interchangeably. And then specifically putting all of that information into a business context so it's meaningful and useful to network operations. That's including on-prem, it's including clients, it's including in public cloud and with SaaS providers as well. So how do we do that? We start off, and remember, we're talking about organizing all those data points because we collect everything. So what do we do with that information? We start off by putting all that data we collect into three main categories. And those are going to be our three main metrics. They're sort of the guiding principles that we use to build our framework. We have performance, or rather availability, performance degradation, and general health. And we're talking about an application here, not just in general. It's an application or a service like VoIP or video conferencing or whatever. So the idea here is that the individual data points, all those individual metrics that we collect need to be categorized and displayed for a purpose, for monitoring, for the health of a specific application, or for root cause analysis. Now, by root cause analysis, what I mean is triaging an active problem as it's happening, figuring out what the root cause was, and then figuring out how to prevent that from happening again. So we want all our data points that we collect from ESXi, from Cisco router, from a Palo Alto firewall. We want all that stuff to kind of fit into these categories, into this framework. So this gives us right off the bat sort of a first step in deciding what information is important and what really isn't that important. And it's going to be how we start to build that insight into otherwise, what's otherwise just a collection of data points. You're going to see that in our dashboards and how that fleshes out. That's what drives how we integrate our tools together, what kind of dashboards we do create, what kind of UI we have, what kind of built-in workflows we use and customized workflows. It's all geared around that. We have all this information. This is irrelevant. This is important. This is what's important to your application, you personally. Service availability, basically, is the specific application available or not? And keep in mind a hard down situation could be related to a device failure or device problem, or it could be security related. We found at Riverbed that most security issues actually manifest themselves in some sort of performance problem, whether that's a hard down or a performance degradation. So the few metrics here on your screen, we're pulling those from the network, right? Some of them are irrelevant, some are relevant, and there's way more. This is not an exhaustive list. But they're in terms of a specific application. So it's not just a side note for us. We do that so we can correlate all these data points, connection requests, connection fails, page response time, what the throughput is and all those things there. And then we figure out how to present this information in the UI, basically how we design our dashboards and visibility workflows to show, hey, this is what the application's doing. You have a red flag here. So as an example, you have a financial application, I don't know, and maybe you have a front end in Azure, maybe with some load balancers in front, a back end in AWS. And these particular metrics are going to tell us how many times a connection is requested for each of the devices. That's the first bullet point. That's the connection request. And they're going to tell us how many of those connection requests failed. And we can learn how long it takes to set up a connection between an end user and the service. But it's all tied to that application. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just to help you understand the depth of our analysis. So we also want to consider the network path in between an application and the end user. There's a lot of data there. In fact, there's a tremendous amount of data, and we are kind of network centric because of our heritage. So we use metrics from the network. How long is that branch firewall holding on to a packet to perform deep packet inspection? That's actually something that came across my path recently with a customer. Is that affecting application performance? Is it supposed to be doing that? What's the round trip time for a packet to get from one end of the network to the other? And how many times do we send the same packets maybe back and forth across the network? All those things are going to affect performance. So Like I said, they're a little bit more network centric, but there's a ton of overlap with this in service availability because we're looking at a system of interrelated components. I don't need to tell you that, you know this. And it's the application itself that's key. That's the underlying unifying factor to all of this. So the next thing we're going to do is look at specific visibility tools. I'm not going to dive super deep into all of them because of our time constraint, and I wanted to focus on what the driving force behind our business is. But we're going to look into the overall solution, and we'll talk about how we collect and organize that data. But I do want to first pause and recap for you. I want to make this clear. What we do at Riverbed is provide visibility into what's going on with your applications. John mentioned it. Now I'm mentioning again. It includes collecting data from a lot of different devices across a distributed infrastructure. And we do that to help network operations work better. We want to be able to help you ensure optimal application delivery down to the end user. That's our goal. So we collect a ton of specific data, but we also put that data into a framework of those 3 key metrics that are tied to a specific application. That's a big part of what we do. And so therefore we can paint a picture of a specific application for you. So actually do that. Picture an application that you struggle with at your workplace and how you can start pulling only relevant data to that application and then how to develop a picture around it. It allows you as a sysadmin, an admin, security person, whatever, to have a sense of how your application is performing at any given time. I think I said that like 5 times, but it does give you a way to find out in detail why an application is having performance problems in real time. That's the root cause analysis. So that's what we do, and that's why we do it. And now I want to move on to the specific tools. You might be familiar with some of these. So we're collecting telemetry from a variety of network devices. I think one of the gentlemen mentioned switches and routers. That's true. We're getting flows from public cloud. We're getting and from your devices. We're looking at transactions between clients and servers. We're looking at the transactions between servers and other servers, like maybe even between VMs, and we're mapping all of that to a specific application. And we're going to collect information using traditional methods like SNMP, direct CLI access, CLI over SSH or whatever, packet captures. That's a big deal for us. Device polling, flow data from the cloud, device APIs as they're available, and really whatever else we can get our hands on, we're going to collect that. And we're ultimately piecing together that picture of your application, which is why we want all of it. So it's important, like John said earlier, that we have full fidelity information from as many sources as possible. So all this telemetry comes from several different tools. We're going to be on this slide for a little bit longer because there's quite a bit here. So on your screen, you have just a few, but these are the main tools that we're going to talk about today. They kind of form the foundation of what we do. On the top here, we have Portal. Portal is our unifying dashboard. Please remember that. Now, it's just a VM that we spin up, and all our visibility tools will integrate into it. So you don't necessarily log into each of our visibility tools every day. I mean, you can. They also have dashboards and they're standalone, and that's fine. But the whole point here is that a sysadmin, network operator, whatever, can log into Portal day to day to see any alerts and to start any troubleshooting workflows, again, according to application. I mean, you can organize according to a site, a branch office, and other things, but we're very focused on applications. So within Portal, you have application dependency maps. So you identify an application and you figure out what are all the physical and virtual devices out there that application touches, and you start monitoring that. And then we're going to group things to correlate specific data points with an application. So you have your visibility dashboards there too. And something that we're going to look at in a minute is how we organize that information. It's not just a bucket called interfaces or CPU. It's what we call it is data in context. So on the left in blue is AppResponse. It's our tool used specifically for application performance monitoring, or APM. So AppResponse is an appliance. It's either physical or virtual. It is an actual appliance, and we feed it all the packets from relevant devices on-prem or in public cloud. And it's dedicated to providing that very thing, very granular application-specific information. It's literally transaction by transaction, packet by packet. You can look at client, server, multiple clients, whatever, and look at literally each transaction and drill down to figure out what's going on, what's going wrong. And that's actually what I mentioned earlier. We're very proud of that. We call it time to packets. Basically means we have 100% full fidelity visibility because we have all the packets into application network performance, but it's in real time. The packets are right there. You're not doing ad hoc, Wireshark captures, which are awesome, by the way. As an engineer, I love doing that, but it's all right there. Continuous packet capture. So an engineer doesn't have to go on a wild goose chase. A couple clicks and you have it all right there.
Hey, Bill, I got a question.
Yeah.
So specifically with the AppResponse, is this something where you can tune, like, say, if you're looking for a 500 millisecond response time for a specific application, like say in banking or something like that, and you're looking for the end user response time, how does that actually plug into the application itself? Is it something, does the app need to be written to have that flow in there, or is it something that you can build custom depending on the application itself?
Mm-hmm. So in a few minutes, we're going to talk about application onboarding, which do, some customers do, some customers don't, but it's basically integrating a workflow based on an application. So we look at all the metrics and thresholds that you care about. And then we start to determine, all right, 500 milliseconds is a long time, by the way, but you got a 500 millisecond threshold. I mean, I know sensitive applications are going to be down in the 15, 20 millisecond range. And I know that from my work in SD-WAN. So you plug in some of those thresholds and metrics that are important to you. And yeah, you create alerts. But what's also important is that doing this, remember, we have a continual packet capture, continual flows, you can look back if you want, if you have the storage capacity, you can look back 2 years and therefore build a baseline. So you can know that, this application performs fine up until about 350 milliseconds. And past that, we start to see performance issues. Here's the evidence for that. So to answer your question, I'm not sure who asked it. Yeah, we can integrate those right into our dashboards.
Okay, I have another question.
Yes.
That's the storage admin is getting a bit nervous. Where are you storing all these metrics?
Well, I mean, you're going to, some of that is right there on box, but you are going to have some storage capacity. So yes, if you have limited storage capacity in your environment, maybe you can't store for 5 years. That is true. Not being in professional services, I can't tell you exactly how much 2 years of data is going to, take up. But you're right. That is based on a customer by customer basis where you have to determine how long, how far back you want to store that data.
I have a question around the application aspect. I mean, so the network starts at the TCP/IP stack inside the server that hosts the application. Okay, mm-hmm. But you didn't talk about agents of any sort. So how do you keep track of what is happening from the real application level and down to the network card? Okay, in the single server, isn't it relevant to get the full picture that you're talking about?
Yeah, it is. A lot of these tools are network centric. So that's a great question. So I do hear what you're saying there. And that's something that we're looking at, whether it's agent based or some other, tool. For example, on our application acceleration side of the house, performance side of the house, we have the client accelerator agent, which sits on workstations, and we could put it anywhere, any kind of device. And so we're able to glean information from that. And that's something that we're looking at doing. So having a distributed agent-based visibility solution, that does make sense.
Another question, what happens if the traffic is encrypted end to end? Mm-hmm. So do you get the same level of information or it's a fuzzy picture in this case because, you miss some information that maybe are encrypted?
Right. Now, I mean, if we're talking about an enterprise, we're getting that same picture because we're decrypting the traffic. If we're optimizing it, especially because if we're optimizing the traffic for our customer as well, we need to decrypt it. So we'll be part of the enterprise's PKI. There's opportunities where certain devices have to join a domain, or there's certificate infrastructure. But yeah, that's unencrypted. So that isn't necessarily all web traffic. We can't encrypt stuff that's public, but within an enterprise, that visibility is completely wide open.
Phil, may I ask you a question? There have been questions before related to how data is collected and stored. My question is it necessary to make any specific configuration or modification into the network setup to allow all this data to flow into your NPM solution?
Absolutely, yeah. Our customers are typically very large, so they often will do a lot of that themselves, but you absolutely need to point flows somewhere. You have to configure SNMP on your devices. Again, with like logs from vCenter or wherever, KVM, I don't know, whatever it is. So there is some configuration, there is some setup involved when you first deploy our solution. Oftentimes, because it's just a lot of stuff, our professional services will be involved. That's to us not the hard part. Yeah, you got to touch a lot of boxes, yes. But what's more important to us, at least, is getting our professional services involved to do the application onboarding and developing those custom workflows and dashboards for you. That's what we care about, because we don't want to just say, here's a dashboard with user response time. I mean, that's cool. I like looking at some of that stuff, but I want to be able to say, this is my specific application. So our PS will work more on that side. But to answer your question explicitly, yes, you do have to touch devices and point that information to our tools. So NetProfiler, that's to the right there in orange, or rather in the center. That's also an appliance, physical or virtual, and it's dedicated to analyzing flows. And what we do is we deploy flow gateways. It's not pictured on the slide there, but they are dedicated to collecting that flow data from all our routers and switches and WAN app appliances. And then those flow gateways will feed that information to NetProfiler. So that means that NetProfiler is more like the engine that does the organization and analysis. And that's what you can log into directly. Though we want you to log into Portal, you can log into these individually. And you're going to get, application insight. You're familiar with flow logs. But it is network centric. So basically, what are applications doing? Where are they operating? How much bandwidth are they consuming? Who are the top talkers? That kind of stuff. And this is important, though. Our tools don't just integrate with Portal. Now, the arrows on your screen are all upward, right, to Portal. I wish I had some arrows going left and right. Our tools integrate with each other as well. So NetProfiler will build application maps to the underlying infrastructure, and it uses NetIM to do that. So they're working with each other. And that's the tool to the right in yellow. And so we want to know, like, for example, how an application is performing, great, but in the context of the actual physical gear that it's running on, we want to be able to tie that to gear, what's going on here. And that, again, that's data in context. So NetIM is our infrastructure visibility tool. So we got through AppResponse, NetProfiler, now NetIM. That's the infrastructure visibility tool that collects information from routers and switches, WAN app appliances. And that's going to, again, use traditional methods like SNMP, WMI, CLI, network device APIs, whatever we need to do to get to a device. It doesn't really matter as long as we can get information out of it. And we use NetIM also for synthetic testing and monitoring. Now, I'm not going to get into that, but I'll give you a quick rundown. It's basically a very pointed way of monitoring a specific application performance and do testing. So you can baseline activity, measure SLA, see how long it takes for a page to open up. You can see here in the graphic, we're looking at web servers, application servers, database servers, that kind of thing. So although we have multiple dedicated tools to serve specific purposes, I mean, we do that because each tool is doing so much heavy lifting, so we have dedicated appliances. We look at this as having one unified performance monitoring solution. You log into Portal and you start from there. So we collect data on premises, in private clouds, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environments. Kind of going back to what Tony said earlier, to us, they're just flows and packets. It's kind of the same regardless of where it is, where it's coming from. So our goal is to collect all packet data, all flow data, all device metrics all the time. And so each of these components, they're useful on their own and you can log into them and that's fine, but they're just brush strokes in the complete painting, if you will, our picture of what's happening with an application.
How would this work for container-based workloads that have ephemeral IPs?
So we're working on something along those lines. I'm not going to speak too specifically about it because I'm not a subject matter expert on where we're headed, but that is absolutely a top priority for us. For that reason, they're ephemeral IPs. So, we have a process of looking at deploying tags that are not IP based, kind of like a DNS infrastructure. It's a tag that follows a container or whatever it is. And so I don't have a good answer for you yet. That's something that we're working on. Specifically, container management, SaaS providers, and getting that same level of visibility that we have with everything else there as well. And I think Vince is going to speak to that a little bit. Basically, what we're saying is that Portal is customizable. It's just a Windows VM that we spin up. The tools feed into that. Portal can feed into other tools. It's a quick installation, and that's really where you start with Riverbed NPM. That's where you start. You start in Portal. You have your dashboards, and then if you drill down, they're all tied to each other. You're clicking on a dashboard, and without you realizing it, all of a sudden you're in NetProfiler. You're still in Portal, but you're in NetProfiler now. You can track other metrics as well, like, yeah, I mean, you could track CPU and round trip time, all those cool things, but you could track sales metrics, right? By pulling information from whatever CRM. You can look at AWS billing month by month. We're aware that that's a concern. You can monitor virtual environments, right? VM to VM network activity. So you can see we have several different widgets or dashlets, whatever you want to call them, on the main dashboard based on whatever our customer is interested in. And really the key here is working with our professional services to develop all that out so it's as useful as possible. So Portal's where we build our application maps. We build our dependency maps, network dependencies, server dependencies. We look at individual hosts. We collect everything. So all the data is there. It's just really a matter of building out the appropriate dashboards and workflows. That's the thing. We have all the packets, we have all the flows. Now, how do we, munge it together so it's relevant? Most of our customers are pretty big, so some of them do that internally, but we do encourage them to work with our professional services to flesh that out. So again, the key is putting data into context. Data that we get from AppResponse, NetIM, NetProfiler, some of our other analysis tools as well.
Phil, do you have any role-based access, control or dual factor authentication, whatever can out, this is a lot of information that you provide.
That's correct. Actually, I went through the slide very quickly. In my notes, I was going to mention that. So that's good. That's a great question. Yes, we're multi-tenant, role-based access control. Two-factor authentication, I don't know about. That's a good question. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I'm sorry, I can't answer you. But we do have, we make it available to anybody in the organization. So if it's a level 1 help desk, they get the appropriate privileges. Or to network operations manager, it's appropriate for that. And because we typically serve very, very large customers, we do have a need to provide multi-tenancy as well. So if you think of a very large organization as multiple business units that operate autonomously, we need to do that. Or a provider, that does that. So to answer your question quickly, because I have to move on, yes, we offer some of those NOC capabilities, whatever you want to call them. Okay. So here the goal here is aligning data with an application architecture. So this is the visibility starting point in Portal. We create groups to inspect whatever, maybe specific hosts that are a concern to us. More likely, we want to know about host groups, right? Like all the database servers in the primary data center, whatever. And then we create workflows built around that to monitor specific IP conversations between them or specific protocols, whatever it is. But we're looking at the relevant information. We choose that so that, if we care about connection requests, HTTP codes, round trip times, and so on. And then we start to build a picture of the specific application health. We're trying to align the data with the application architecture. So it's all done in Portal, but again, the data is coming from all our tools. So application onboarding is what we call it, and it's basically aligning the data to some sort of a workflow and basically the application's architecture. So we work with the customer to pull in that application, correlate it with specific devices, physical devices, virtual devices that it relies on, correlate it with specific thresholds and metrics, like somebody mentioned earlier, basically get all those things kind of figured out, and then build out your dashboards that speak directly to that. Remember that those dashboards, though, you click on a thing and all of a sudden you're in AppResponse looking at packets if you want to and troubleshooting. You have the best of both worlds here and everywhere in between. So we build an application map. Some of that's automated. Some of that is definitely manual. But in the end, it's laser focused on an application or a service and everything related to it. That's the idea.
Do you have any sort of a custom library for specific applications, or are most of the applications wired in somewhat manually?
There's going to be a combination of both, and usually there's a manual component involved. As much as I'd like to say, everything is supported out of the box perfectly, which again is why we like to get integrated from a professional services standpoint to plug that stuff in. So as you can see here, okay. Look at all these individual things. This is just an example, conversation grouping. You don't have to group it this way, but again, relevant to the customer. How do we align data to an application? Conversation grouping in Portal is monitoring the application by monitoring maybe the protocols that you care about, specific IPs, URLs, specific hosts on the network, and so on. And then you get your dashboard that gives you the picture that you want. And this is kind of a network-centric approach as well. But when you combine it with the information from all other tools, you do get different perspectives of the same traffic, kind of a more holistic picture. So here's an example of context grouping. It's a method we use to monitor application performance among tiers of applications. So you can see you have your web tier, app tier, database tier. load balancers, switches, routers, application servers, everything going on in between each tier to make the application work. That's another way we group data. I'm flying through here now, but I want to give you a flavor of the different ways you can group. And this is just a sample. We can group by protocol. Maybe you're just interested in looking at all HTTP conversations because for whatever reason. So every customer is going to want to see different data and see it differently. So it's always going to be based on their environment, their needs. But ultimately, what we're trying to do for our customers is provide that framework, and then you can build it out from there. So the way we've designed all of this, this kind of correlation allows you to do, analyze application behaviors as well. So you have things like capacity planning and baselining, predict future behavior as much as possible. Some of that is pie in the sky kind of stuff, right? Like I know how that interface is going to work on a Tuesday next week, sort of, but we're making predictions here. And then we can also automate the discovery and mapping of applications to an extent. Like I said just a moment ago, there is a manual component. And then the cool part is that when we have those baselines, we can start alerting on deviations. We know what normal looks like, and that's important. And of course, it extends into our cloud resources. We're still working on that. I mentioned containers, I mentioned SaaS providers, but whether it's looking at an application, in AWS, and we front end it with AppResponse, or we're looking at billable data transfer, right? That's all important to us. And it's true for hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. To us, it's flows and packets. We collect it all. So I'm going to end here. I'd like to end actually where we began, with a picture of Bob Ross. He's not my hero. It's top of mind because of my kids right now. So each of those happy little trees, each of those individual brush strokes that he makes on a canvas, they're all part and parcel of the larger picture, right? I hope that metaphor makes sense. In the same way, each individual data point, each little metric, little bit that we get from the network, all that telemetry that we collect, it has some value on its own, but the way we see it is it helps us paint the big picture of what's going on with an application. So the goal at Riverbed isn't to provide you with really nice graphs. It's to ensure through our performance and visibility tools that applications that your business relies on, they work consistently, they work securely, and they work at peak performance. So we're looking at the big picture, or in other words, how we can make your network operations work better. Thanks very much.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
How big a company do I have to be before this makes sense?
Well, that's a hard answer, or rather something kind of difficult to answer just because, if you're a small business with a head-end firewall router and 8 switches, there's still a lot of data that you can glean from that. But once you start to develop a distributed environment, once you start to have maybe a work from anywhere work policy for your end users, once you start to incorporate cloud environments as well, that's where you're really going to get a lot of benefit because everything is coming into one place. So to say how big does a customer have to be before it makes sense, that's really a question for their CFO, right? Look at licensing, look at the cost of deployment and professional services, and when does it start to make sense? Some organizations are very small, yet are highly regulated. Maybe they're some kind of financial services. We have a lot of those kind of customers, or government. We have a lot of those as well. And regardless of their size, they have very strict security requirements, and they need that kind of visibility. So I don't know if it's necessarily the size, but it's to what extent do you need to know exactly what's going on?